Before we begin, thank you very much to Captain Ginyu for joining the Patreon campaign. Big fan of your work, by the way. I dig the poses. Poses are cool. Like the butt up, head between legs. It's inspired. It's inspired. No Power Ranger ever thought of that. Good one. Good one. Why aren't the rest of the Ginyu Force on my Patreon? You're the captain. Get on that. Let's get them all in here. Like, make them do it. You're technically, well, Frieza's paying your salary. You know, you get my drift. But thank you very much for the support. Thank you very much for weird shout-outs. It's always fun to get. And as always, thank you very much for everyone who pitches in and helps keep the channel going. All helps. So, I want to look back at some of the other Transformer anniversary lines that we have had over the years. Now that we're coming up on the 40th anniversary, I want to look back at some of the weird stuff that came out for the other, major milestone years. And one of the ones that struck me the most was Transformers Cloud, kind of patterned as a 30th anniversary line for Takara in Japan. It's one of the stranger ones. Cloud is an interesting beast. So, for starters, it is very much designed like the Universe line before it, or in Japan, something like the Robot Masters line, or like TJOmega Beast Wars, where it's just an excuse to repaint a whole lot of toys, essentially as whoever we want. And they came up with some weird ideas. Now, for starters, we will say, there is more than just a toy line to Transformers Cloud. There is an actual comic, like kind of similar to the Transformer Legends pack-in comics that we have gotten in more recent figures from Takara, but these do not have nearly as detailed a record on them. Some are available, some are not. If you go to TF Wiki and try to look up the final issue, there is no info. So I do not know how this ends. We didn't have like dedicated people who were scanning and translating these things as they came out like we do now for the Legends comics. We just kind of had to we had to rely on machine translations and whichever ones are lying around that people have actually translated. So it's an incomplete story. You can get some of it. They did a lot just to basically use the current toy line, very similar to the Legends comic. It incorporated as much of the current toy line as they could work in, while still being centered around the Transformers Cloud characters. So you would have a Starscream issue popping up that would also feature Armada Starscream, because of course he had a anniversary toy during the 30th based on his original Armada design. Things like that. Things like that. The storylines would also rely on a few tricks that FunPub also used a lot, and that is the virtual redeco. You would see a lot of existing molds repainted to represent different characters, but they only appeared in fiction. Things like the Generations Wreckers, done up in more G1 color schemes. And things like what you see here, which is Soundwave depicted as a Viacon from Transformers Prime. Now, it is very much, and I'll tell you what it reminds me of at the end. We'll save that for the end because that's a bit of a discussion in and of itself. Suffice to say, it was a lot of designers and artists over at Takara who are looking at things in very interesting ways in order to figure out what molds would work as what characters, whether they got toys or not, which does lead to some really interesting possibilities. The other thing they did, like I said, is they filled out the line with, and the story and the cast, with existing molds that needed some kind of fiction to help get them sold. Which, of course, is why we see Grimlock here from Fall of Cybertron. We see the Fall of Cybertron Thundercracker in the background. Yeah, and there's a lot of weird characters popping up. Because it was an anniversary line, they did bop all around the universe of Transformers, which is why you see Beast Wars 2 Galvatron. Oh, I'm sorry, Beast Wars the second Galvatron. Don't want to get that fired up in the comments. Alright, so it was a weird series. It was a really weird series that had a lot of odd things happening. I really do want to give it a full read at some point and maybe talk about it on the channel, because it does seem like it rivals Legends and just how bizarre the storytelling is. Frankly, any of the Japanese-only stories, like the mangas, they all have weird stories. Everything from Giltar from the G1 comics to, yeah, Kiss Players and everything that happened in its manga after the creepy arc. There's a lot of weird storytelling in Japan. I think we know this already. So, most people remember Transformers Cloud as a toy line, so we need to look at the toys. I'm not going to do this in any particular order outside of just like the order it amuses me. So, we start off with, obviously, the Optimus Prime of the line, and no real twist or shock here. It's classics Optimus Prime in yet another variation of his original deco. This one is supposed to be leaning much closer to how he looked in the cartoon, so it omits things like the silver striping down the side of the vehicle, and it comes across a little bit darker, which might just be the photo. Might just be the photo on that one. Either way, it's a little bit more plain of a design. I've actually come to really appreciate the paint schemes on the classics figures, if only to kind of like, you know, just like add some flair to some of the classic Generation 1 styles. It's not a bad looking Prime though. You know, if you got your hands on it, I'm sure you'd be happy with it. It's a very solid toy. The interesting thing I like is that the weapons are painted entirely in black. So Optimus's double barrel gun that forms from his exhaust, those are actually done up in black to try and get as close to his normal rifle as possible. It's the wind vane. That's the interesting one. It's done up in complete black, and it's not referred to as an extra weapon in the or wind vane in the instructions. It's actually referred to as an energy pack, because it is specifically referencing the electronic box that came with Generation 2 Optimus Prime. That's where the black color scheme comes from, with the big silver Autobot logo. And it makes sense considering that little sound box was designed to connect to the back of the original Optimus Prime toy the same way the wind vane does on the robot mode here. It's actually really smart usage and really smart homage by Takara. Very, very fun. The counterpart Decepticon leader, of course, is going to be Megatron, and his mold? Bludgeon. Revenge of the Fallen Bludgeon. So, I've stated this in the past. I will continue to state this now. I really don't like this toy. I know a lot of people love this toy. It's one of the toys where I look at it and go, this thing looks awful. I don't like the spindly skeletal arms and hips. I don't like the going from like Generation style solid parts to movie style skeletal parts. I don't like how like weirdly round his chest is in its angles. Almost comes across, like it always came across more like an animated design to me. And then you throw a straight up G1 head on top of it, and there's just so many weird aesthetics meshing here. It just never appealed to me. I never liked this mold. It just always felt weird and off, and good luck getting any version of this mold where the blade on the sword isn't bent somehow. But it is what it is. I mean, it's a tank that wasn't Megatron before, so it's Megatron now. I guess that back then was an inevitability, so we'll just go with it. There was a tank that was not redone into Megatron around this time because it also turned into a jet. So instead it was redone into Starscream. Cloud actually had the idea of repainting the Thrilling 30 Blitzwing into Starscream. Because reasons, I guess. So for one, we know this is not a great mold. We know it does have some pretty big issues to it, which is really unfortunate. You'll notice in this series, they did not try to do any remolding whatsoever. There are no remolds to any of these figures. They just straight up repainted the heads the way they were, and they hope for the best. This leads to one of the weirdest looking Starscreams you will ever see. I will say the Blitzwing head does kind of have some resemblances. The vents on the side of the helmet helps a little bit. But man, does it look off. Doesn't help that the comic tried to color it differently either. Or draw it differently, rather. But it is a novel idea. I will give it that. You at least say Starscream turned into a tank once upon a time. That's at least something we got out of this. It's a bizarre idea. It is a very bizarre idea. But it's not the only triple changer we got in the toy line. No, no, no. The Springer mold got used as well, but this one became Rodimus. This is a hilarious one to me. It's hilarious because, one, it works better than it should. This actually does kind of work. Granted, it's definitely a Cybertronian car mode he has to turn into. And obviously, yeah, this is the only time the Hot Rod's ever turned into a helicopter. But what I like about it is that something about the IDW version of Springer that this was based on actually does work, because it's got the fin on the head they could paint yellow. The kibble on the back kind of gives you the same silhouette as Hot Rod's original fins, so that actually works. Obviously, the color placement can work. And it's funny to me that RC's first love interest got repainted from her second love interest. But best of both worlds if you're RC, I guess. This is one of those that, like, it absolutely should not work, but it kind of works in a super twisted way, to the point where if we get another Springer toy, I wouldn't mind a Generation Selects that actually did this. It works in a really bizarre way of, like, after, like if you imagine, like, Hot Rod after he matured as Rodimus Prime, but let Optimus have the Matrix back, so now he's just, like, better, more mature and more powerful, but not a leader role. So that's kind of where I view this, like an in-between Hot Rod and Rodimus Prime, which I think is appropriate to call Rodimus. So, yeah, it's one of my more favorite ones. If there's anything out of Cloud that I would want, it'd probably be this, especially considering I don't actually have the original mold anymore. I don't have the Thrilling 30 Blitzwing Springer anymore. I don't think I have the Thrilling 30 Blitzwing either. So let's move on. Let us move on. We have more infamous characters, some more big names in Transformers appearing in Cloud because Anniversary line. Shockwave was in the line, redone from Whirl. This is hysterical to me. Number one, doing his weapons in translucent so he could actually have a gun hand. Okay, that's kind of clever. But beyond that, it really does feel like they decided to do this purely because Cyclops' head. That's literally the only reason this repaint exists, because it was a Cyclops toy. So they had to repaint it into a character with only one eye. Or they looked at Whirl and went, it's only got one eye. It could be a Shockwave if you squinted your eyes really hard and then bash your temples in with a ball-peen hammer. It could work. It could work. No, don't mind that his knees are backwards now. It could work. Very odd Shockwave. Very odd Shockwave. Maybe accidentally homaging the movie video game design where he was a helicopter. Maybe. What I liked about this is they really wanted their Voyager class toys to be triple changers, so they actually did work in, aside from they actually made his Gerwalk mode canonical, they also worked in a weapon mode, like an actual artillery cannon mode. And you know what? It's weird, but it kind of works. It's weird. Everything about this line is super weird, and I love it. Okay, so Shockwave has a weapon mode, kinda. So he kinda fits in with his original toy. So those are your vintage characters. Those are all big name, big Transformer characters getting toys in this line. They were not alone though. We got some real left field choices here, which is fun. So for starters, Roadbuster. And I mean that. The name of it is Cloud Roadbuster, based on the what we know as Energon Ironhide. Remember, it's an anniversary line, so they're trying to celebrate a little bit of everything. But man, why Roadbuster? I mean, I get why. Because in Japan, he is based on the Thrilling 30 Roadbuster toy, and in the Japanese version, Super Link, the name wasn't Ironhide, it was Roadbuster. So this does, in Japan, make sense. To us in America, who know him as a weird name dump for Ironhide, this is super bizarre. But I guess turning into an off-road truck, it kind of works. Kinda. You can see the mold and paint patterns. They did try to make it work as Ironhide, Roadbuster, whatever. The helmet, the top of the helmet even looks kind of close. There's some shapes to the helmet that work, and then he has the battle mask going on, which I think the artist had to flip back and forth between for the actual comic book. I mean, at the very least, it's a version of Ironhide that doesn't have the big light bar that everybody hated, right? I guess there's that. It's as heavily armed as it's more heavily armed than the original Ironhide toy. Man, super, super weird choice, right? Super weird choice. Like, you wouldn't think this character would ever get a new toy. Oh, no, Cloud just kicking down the door. Hey, here's a new Ironhide from Energon. Good luck. It's fun, though. It's weird and it's fun. Here's weird. The next one's weird. And you saw him a bit in the comic book pages that I already showed you. Behold. This is Hellwarp. Literally the name, Hellwarp. So, let's look back. Beast Wars II had a character named Starscream based on a Generation 2 jet toy. Alright, that's fair enough. So, in Beast Wars II, a few of those characters got power-ups that morphed them into cybernetic beast forms for reasons. So Starscream became a cybernetic shark named Hellscream. So this is taking the exact same concept and applying it to the Skybite mold in order to create one of the other Seekers as a cybernetic shark. Now, weird differences here. Number one, Hellscream did not have G1 Starscream's color scheme. He didn't even have the color scheme of his original Starscream body, which was black and gray. He was completely different. So this is kind of defying that, because you can see they crowbarred in Skywarp into this mold, right down to like painting where the cockpit would be in the orange. Like, they were trying really super hard on this. So it's a very weird disconnect here. Black, silver, black, purple, and silver are always going to look good, though. I can't deny that. Look how manic the shark mode looks. It's absolute insanity. So it's weird. It's weird. It's based in that. It's based in trying to complete like a scale of Transformers that almost didn't exist. So now there's we need like a shark Thundercracker now, which still does not exist. It kind of reminds me of when BotCon did Cindersaur, trying to complete like the G2 Sparkabots using Beast Wars 10th Megatron. Weird. It's a weird concept like that, right? But again, interesting. It's different. I will admit, it looks cool. It looks cool. And then we leave one last one behind, and this is the funniest one to me of all of them, and it is Cloud Brawn, using the Prime First Edition bulkhead mold. So keep in mind, Minibot in G1 suddenly gets this body. He's big, massive, swollen, and he's one of the largest figures in the line. If you never experienced this figure, it had a brilliant way. This is back when Voyagers were properly big, and not only that, this Voyager decided to bulk itself out by kind of exploding all of its panels outward to really put the bulk in bulkhead. He was gigantic for a Voyager toy, and it's so funny. The head does not fit at all. The head does not fit at all. And what's funny to me is this was actually a canceled Generations toy that never made it to market. So here's the original version. You can see a lot closer to the original mold pattern. So like a lot more, you can see a lot more silver, a lot more green in the legs, a lot of silver on the arms to match the original Brawn design. Here, much darker with the orange becoming bronze. You can see like a lot more bronze in the thighs, green on the arms. I kind of prefer this deco because this kind of makes me think. It puts me in the mindset of, kind of like like a brand new take on Brawn, rather than this one where it looks like you took G1 Brawn, plugged a like a tire pump into his butt and just kept pumping. Just kept pumping. Swell him up, inflate him. Do like an artist on DeviantArt, inflate him. It's a weird, again, weird. And that's basically it. There's only 8 main toys in Cloud. They did do a eHobby exclusive Deadlock toy from Generations Drift based on how he looked in the Cloud comics, but it's also just kind of how Deadlock looked, so technically counts. And Cloud is just bizarre in its execution, but it gives me the right vibe, right? It gives me the right feel for these. You know what it feels like? It feels like Unicron Trilogy homages. That's what it feels like. Looking at the molds and thinking to yourself, who could that be? Who could we turn that into? Well, the body shape is kind of close to this character, so we'll repaint him like that, and the head will just kind of like, okay, it's a different version of him. Or like, well, these body shapes, there's this vehicle that this character is normally associated with. We'll have to work with that. It's weird. But it's inspired, and I really miss homages like this. I really do. And Cloud was kind of like the last hurrah Transformers ever had with doing homages in that style. Everything now is like, you get new heads, you get new bodies, you get like full-on retools that only use like 40% of the original mold in order to make it look like the second character they had in mind for the toy. Not things like this, where it's just whatever comes to mind and whatever comes close. And you just kind of have to imagine the new character based on the old one. And that's, there's a sense of adventure and there's a sense of imagination that's kind of lost because we don't do that anymore. So, so pour one out for Transformers Cloud. Kind of the last hurrah of how we used to do homages in Transformers. But no, it's a fun series to look back on, albeit a short one. So, thank you guys for watching. As always, hope you enjoyed this little history lesson. There's plenty of other anniversary lines that we could go over. It doesn't have to be G1 anniversary. We can look at Beast Wars 10th or TJOmega as well. At least the ones we haven't looked at already. But thank you guys for watching, and as always, I will see you next time.
We parlay with the captain.
You think a werecroc is going to listen to elvish rules of piracy?
Of course it would be the freaking elves that invented parlay.
I had to think of a quick replacement for the French.